Hey guys, what happened?
We were coming around the corner to take the bridge over I-5 there, right north into Squally, and we went on the ground.
Okay, is everybody okay?
I'm still figuring that out. We got cars everywhere and down onto the highway.
Okay, copy that.
Peter Goles is with us. Mary Schiavo is with us as well. Peter, you're the former National Transportation Safety Board Managing Director. That is a very, very telling audio we just heard from the conductor.
Well, it is, and I think it indicates that, that whatever happened, the engine was past the point where things started to go south. That the engine was still on the track. He was unaware of how serious the accident was, or just beginning to know how serious it was, and was clearly shocked.
Is that extraordinary, unusual that the first car, the engine, is still apparently on the track, but the cars behind it are dangling and off track and upside down?
No, not at all. I mean, sometimes that the engine, with its, it probably is 80,000 pounds, may initiate some sort of problem with the rail, but it's past it when the rail splits and the following cars start to have problems. Or there may have been a problem with the wheels of one of the follow-up cars. We just don't know yet, but it's not all that unusual.
Mary Schiavo is still with us as well. Mary, former Department of Transportation Inspector General. Mary, I want to play that audio one more time. I want you and our viewers to listen carefully, and I'm going to get your thoughts. Listen to this.
Hey guys, what happened?
We were coming around the corner to take the bridge over I-5 there, right north into Squally, and we went on the ground.
Okay, is everybody okay?
I'm still figuring that out. We got cars everywhere and down onto the highway.
Okay, copy that.
All right, you heard him say they were going around the corner over the I-5. Go ahead, Mary, give me your thoughts.
Well, I'm still unclear about whether it was a pull engine or a push engine. It's difficult to tell exactly for sure. His wording almost makes me think it was a pusher engine, meaning the train was the actual engine doing the work was at the rear of the train, but I don't know. I'm just, guessing based on what I've heard. But to me, the operative language that I heard is we were coming into a curve. And again, I mean, there have been so many recent tragedies where that's when things go wrong. You're going into a curve, you either don't slow or you haven't been provided the right information. Whatever modifications were made to these tracks and whatever was done to allow this high-speed train to run over this section of track that didn't have high-speed service before, we don't know if they really did the right analysis and told them the speeds at which they should take this turn. And if it was a pusher train, they're going to be pushing the cars ahead of them at speeds that perhaps haven't been tested with those many cars before. But again, I don't know the answer, whether it was a pulling train or a pushing train, or maybe they had engines at both ends, which would be a little unusual. They wouldn't both be working, but the curve and his description make me think it was a speed on a curve.
Peter, look at the, I assume you can see air, you can see video, you can see the pictures we're showing. These are live pictures coming in. These are the first time we've seen the full extent of this derailment, and you see those cars on the ground there, and as the police spokesman, the sheriff's spokesman said earlier, several of them upside down. Can you see these pictures we're now showing, Peter?
Yes, I can.
So describe what you're seeing right now.
Well, this really is horrific, and I think indicates that the train was going at a high speed, probably at close to the 79 mile an hour limit, because these cars, there's a lot of physics involved.
There you see the front. I think that's the front of the train, still on the tracks, but everything behind it looks like a disaster. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of physics involved. That at that speed and at that weight, when something goes wrong, this is just a horrific event. And my guess is this train was traveling close to the 79 mile an hour limit.
And you see that that one car dangling over Interstate 5, but on the other side, you see the cars, they're all over the place over there, and several of them upside down. Mary, I hope you can see these images we're showing our viewers as well. What jumps out at you?
Again, I agree with Peter. I mean, it looks like this was a very high rate of speed. To have that much inertia and that much inertial force to literally fling that many cars off a track. Now, if you have a train crash where it's a line, where it's a rail out of alignment, you usually don't see that kind of a display of the cars. If it's an out-of-alignment rail, it's a little bit of a different kind of thing. It jumps the track, but you don't see this kind of far-flung tragedy. And I would have to agree that it looks to me that it was a pretty high rate of speed. You know, let's hope they weren't operating above the track speed limit, but going into a curve, it looks to me like the train could not take that curve at that speed. I know it sounds simplistic and nothing's ever that easy, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I just want to point out the Governor Inslee of Washington State, he's just declared a state of emergency in Pierce County where this derailment took place. You know, Peter, when a train like this, a high-speed train, goes into a curve over an interstate, as is the case right here, is it up to the conductor to slow things down, or is it automatic?
Well, in this case, I don't know whether there's positive train control on this track, which is an automatic braking system. But we don't know what the track was rated for, but it's up to the engineer to make sure he's operating within the guidelines and to make the correct decisions. I mean, one of the other things, Wolf, they're going to look at on an accident like this is the crash worthiness of these cars. Did they protect the occupants the way they were supposed to? How were people injured? How were they killed, unfortunately? And were these cars designed correctly? Did they perform the way they were supposed to? This is going to be a very complex investigation.
And we did hear, Mary, that was the engineer talking, saying that there's a problem. So the engineer is okay, and he'll be fully investigated and clearly interviewed at length by the NTSB, right?
Oh, absolutely. They do, obviously, blood testing. They look at his, his activities or whoever the crew is, his and her activities the days before. What were their sleep? What's their sleep pattern? Did they have any problems? Were they alert? And, of course, the black box that records every time that hand touches any controls, throttles, etc. But even the health and well-being, mental well-being of the persons running that train are taken into consideration. But, again, you need to know, and presumably he had or she had the right data, depending on who made up the crew, as to what speed you should take that curve, what speed you should be going, and were they, observing that speed absolutely to the T and not exceeding it, because with this many cars off the track and that far flung, I should add one thing to what Peter said about the survivability of those cars. Not only that, these cars, if they were the newest, most modern cars, they're kind of like a, sort of like a sport plane. They can actually lean into the curves. You have a sort of a three-dimensional motion instead of two-dimensional motion. And they would have helped, if they were operating properly, take the curves at a high rate of speed. It's kind of like a racer on a motorbike. If you've seen, motocross races, as they go into a corner, they lean. Well, the modern train cars do that too, and they help you maintain, beat the centrifugal force on the tracks. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, but look at that. And this is the first time, Peter, that we've seen all those cars derailed on the ground. One of those cars hanging over Interstate 5. The engine, the first car, still on the track after all of this. But these are images that we don't often see. This looks like something. And you've investigated, Peter, when you were at the National Transportation Board. A lot of accidents, a lot of derailments. How unusual is this one?
This one is pretty extraordinary. It's one of the worst certainly in recent memory, in terms of the physical destruction and physical display of the cars. And as you know, as Mary indicated, these could be the newer cars that are designed to take the high-speed turns and 79 miles an hour. We consider it high speed, but the reality is, in the rail industry worldwide, it is not a high speed. You know, we have trains going upwards of 150 miles an hour, but this is a very destructive accident.
Yeah, and Mary, just to give us some perspective, whether in Japan or elsewhere, the trains are moving a lot more quickly than they're moving here in the United States, right?
Absolutely. I had a chance to work at Japan Rail for a very short period of time when I was Inspector General. And what's cool and interesting and very different about the Japan Shinkansen, the bullet trains, is in the Shinkansen lines, there is no place, for example, where the trains meet surface traffic. They have overpasses, and that's eliminated. They built the tracks especially for the Shinkansen, so they don't have these, they don't have sharp curves to take. They had different laws than we do. They were able to build the Shinkansen and then, of course, deal with the lawsuits later as to people who didn't want the train going here or there. So they were able to build this long, smooth, straight rails without having to worry about, gate crossings and trucks on the track. And it was built especially for that. This track was not. In fact, this track was modified. As I said, it was just finished up in the beginning of December, and it's a track not owned by Amtrak. So as Peter said, we don't know if it has positive train control, likely not. And then for parts of it, it had to shunt off to an inner city line. So this was a piecemeal patchwork of track. I mean, it's not Amtrak's fault if they tested properly in terms of what kind of track they have to use. We just don't have a Shinkansen track system in the United States. And so it's going to come down to what Amtrak tested. What did they do? Did they do the right thing of testing, and could this track take it? But Peter's right. This is not high speed. In Japan, some of those Shinkansen lines have set speed records at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Cool.
Some of us who have seen those trains over there, it's really extraordinary and basically very outdated here in the United States, what's going on. I got another expert standing by, Peter, but remind me and our viewers why there are still no seat belts on these Amtrak trains.
Well, that's been it was interesting. I was just going to mention that. They've debated that issue off and on for probably a generation, for 20 years. And it was felt that from analysis of previous accidents, that seat belts were simply redundant and would not have prevented the injuries that occurred inside. Now, they're going to look at that again. They're going to see whether the crashworthiness of the cars, which includes whether there were portions of the interior of the car that caused injury, and we'll be debating that question again.
But Mary,
question,
let me finish your thought, Peter. Go ahead.
I was going to say the real question is if we're going to have high-speed rail service in the United States, intercity rail service, are we going to commit the infrastructure improvements so that it can be done safely for the public?